Welcome to another edition of Influences Podcast. I'm here with turntablist time traveler Erik Laar. Erik is a Toronto born and raised with Estonian roots that run deep. He's an experimental multi-genre producer, vocalist, DJ, and instrumentalist. And Erik has returned to the stage under his own name with a brand new, deeply personal focus inspired by connections to his cultural roots. Digging through the stacks of dusty wax in the Estonian Canadian Museum archives, an encounter with fragments of the past sparked a connection. He began experimenting with new ways of interpreting the Estonian folk tradition. Erik's original pieces are built around the many hopes and deepest pains of his country's trying past and the manifestation of those experiences in the now. What began as a one-off live stream performance in 2021 gave way to festival appearance and is now the foundation of his forthcoming EP. Using his finely tuned turntablist techniques as a catalyst for his musical expression is what defines Erik's unique studio production and live shows. Drum machines, turntables, vinyl, keyboards, laptops, glockenspiel, and live vocals are the components of any given creation. The continuous goal to create a symbiotic balance between electronic and acoustic, digital and natural, big bad beats with a soft side. Erik is no stranger to the stage and the studio. In the past, he has released music under several monikers, including Circles and Squares in 2013, has released 2 studio albums, Fragmental in 2006 and Scatapopia 2008, as one half of widely acclaimed turntable band Inside a Mind, and has performed countless events at clubs as DJ Steptone. His storied performance past includes live film scores for TIFF Lifebox, touring as part of Evergreen Gamelin Orchestra in Canada, performing at renowned LA Beat Weekly Low End Theory, opening or collaborating with Kid Koala, Daedalus, RJ, D2, Milk and Bone, and playing various concert halls in Canada and the US. Erik is passing on his passion as owner, director, and instructor to students at Off Center DJ School in Toronto. Erik, welcome to Influences Podcast.
Great to be here, man. That's quite the intro. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that I had to read the whole thing because this is the most detailed intro that I've so far. And I'm an English teacher, and it's so well written that I wanted to read the whole thing. So
Nice, man. I love it. Love it.
I'm glad you entertained that because
Yeah, absolutely. No, great to be here, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Hey, you're welcome. So I wanted to start off, if you could please explain or outline your journey from DJ Steptone to producer, vocalist, and instrumentalist, turntablist, Erik Laar. And
Yeah, I mean, it's been a ride, man. It's been a ride for sure. I started dabbling with the turntables in 1996. So that's when I first started my first encounter with vinyl and in a kind of musical sense. I'd always played musical instruments, kind of grew up with, traditional kind of piano lessons and, being Estonian, we always had choirs and singing and things like this that we did as part of the community and the culture. And that obviously, as you kind of hit those teenage years, you're kind of looking for a bit of an expression, right? And something that's a bit more true to your individual voice. So I think that's when sort of the first steps of what we see today are that's where it first started, thinking about the turntable as a musical instrument, trying to kind of like apply musical skills to the turntable and really trying to crack it open, not so much just as a platform to play other people's music, but to try to make it into something that I used creatively to express myself with, right? So yeah, back in the day, that's how I started playing old school hip hop. Is kind of was my first genre on the turntables,
Yep.
that was the first thing I did, and you have like 6 records and you try to figure out how to mix all those records until you can afford to buy a new one. and
Yeah.
and uh and then yeah, over the years it's sort of turned going through a lot of different stages, right? So
Yeah, I'm just wondering why not call yourself a musician then? Like you have every other thing in there, but the
yeah, I don't
musician
know.
is not there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against it, I
Yeah.
just feel there is a bit of a difference, I think, between someone who plays music from like musician standpoint, meaning like they read notes and they play other people's music in that way, versus DJing and electronic music production. I feel like it's a bit more of almost like an oral tradition,
Okay.
where there's a little bit less of an academic kind of focus and approach to it, which I've found always really inspiring, having come from a more kind of rigid traditional music background, right? So
Yeah.
I found it really liberating. Yeah. Having said that, when we were Inside of Mind, we used to call ourselves turntable musicians. So that's
Okay.
uh yeah.
Okay. So it was there.
It was there at
Just
one point. Yeah,
just
absolutely.
not in the
Yeah.
bio.
It's not, yeah. I gotta
Yeah.
edit that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Oh, it was really well written, like I said. So your cultural background is Estonian. How has this influenced your musical journey?
Yeah, I mean, lately in a big way. I don't think that for a long time it was super important in my electronic music production or in my anything from, that I've created professionally. It wasn't there necessarily consciously. I think it's always sort of been there in terms of the feelings and the emotions and the things that you express, right? But especially in the last, like you were saying in the bio there, is like in the last 3 years, it's become um it's become to the forefront, and I've realized that in some ways I've been kind of singing and creating from the feelings of my cultural past the whole time without really being conscious of it, going through the motions of scratching, or going through the motions of making electronic music of whatever different genre, but like the feeling was always something that came from my cultural background. So it's really cool to actually like more consciously unite with those kind of things.
Yeah.
Kind of brings it full circle in some ways, which is I think why it's I'm now just Erik Laar is what I go by versus any other moniker. It's sort of like come full circle back to those kind of roots, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, because my cultural background or my heritage is Ukrainian, and you
right.
just remixed a record called "Let Me Out" by
Yes.
Baklava. Excuse me if I get this wrong, but the Balk
Balaclava.
Balaclava. I should know
Yeah, yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Balaclava Blues. So you just remixed a record, "Let Me Out" by the Balaclava Blues, which is a Ukrainian folk noir band. Tell us
Yes.
how that happened.
Yeah, Mark and Mariska Marcik have been part of my life for a few years now. They invited me out to a couple of Ukrainian fundraisers they were doing when the wars first started, when the
Yeah,
war first started.
right.
And so we did a show together at one of these immersive lighthouse exhibits. They're a really cool multi well, it's like a visual. They have huge visual projections as well,
Right.
in as an important part of their show. Anyway, so we did a couple of shows there. They invited me out to that, and it kind of just the relationship naturally has grown since then, to a point now where they trusted me to do this remix of theirs. They've been touring nonstop pretty much since that show in May of 2022, I guess. I think
Yeah.
as we speak, they're in Taiwan at the moment, doing a global music festival there. And yeah, it's been a really cool kind of journey. They're super inspiring, and they have a way of also capturing. There's a bit of a shared cultural heritage there in terms of the trials and tribulations of having you know, a neighbor that's not so friendly, country wise, right?
Yeah,
So on your
absolutely.
borders. So yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a natural kind of symbiosis there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I just said my heritage is Ukrainian, but what is Ukrainian folk noir?
I think the noir part, there is sort of like there's a folk element where um they get their inspiration from music that comes from deep in, you know, in the roots and the history of Ukrainian folk music. The noir part, I feel, has to do with you know, their sort of take on what's happening at the moment. So it's not necessarily light and bubbly music. It's fierce, it's heavy, it's dark, it's edgy, but it's also hopeful, which is a big part of that as well.
That's fantastic. So kind of mirroring the plight of what's going on over there.
Yeah, in some ways, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
awesome. Okay, you produced and released a track in April of 2023 called It's a Long Way Down. Not
Yeah.
only that, you made a music video with it. Could you please
Yeah.
tell us the process you had to go through with that?
But it's a long way down. Was the first release. Yeah, the video was awesome. I did it with a friend of mine who's a super talented editor and videographer, Jan Simberg. He goes by Pistol Tricks is what he goes by. And yeah, it was like a collaborative project with him with the video part of it. And it's a long way down. I wrote a while ago. I think I first wrote it in like maybe 2012 is when I first wrote the track. And then yeah, just kind of digging through things, thinking about things that kind of really represented me. And that was the first piece that I wanted to release to people. Yeah.
Awesome. So how long did it take to do that? I mean, obviously you wrote the track in 12, but
Yeah.
there's like from 12 to 23. I mean, it must have been on and on.
I wasn't working
Like
on it the
like
whole time, but yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
do procrastinate. I do procrastinate on things, but not that. Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. It's funny because I put that track to bed or to rest for a while, and I think that I had intentions of releasing it, and then for whatever reason, different things come up in life, and it wasn't the right time. Um, you know, and again, it's like the worst thing to do is do false starts when it's like start, stop, and start and stop. So it's like I'm in a position now in life and creatively and with things that I'm doing that I'm kind of ready to kind of hit it and go forward. So that's why it was a good time to release it now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And where did you come up with the idea for the track?
Yeah, the track, I think there's sort of like a bit of a war story theme there as well, where it's actually you know, the lyrics are like, you know, almost like there's the visual is like two people, two lovers on the side of a mountain, with like a, you know, an army with them, like a rebellion army with them that are ready to take on the big powers that be down below, and this is their last quiet moment before they, you know, propel themselves into whatever's to come in the future, right? So that was the kind of idea behind the story. um where it came from, I don't know, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, in the stars,
Yeah.
man, somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful, man. That's awesome. So one of the fascinating things I find about your music is that it's a quote symbiotic balance between electronic and acoustic, digital and natural.
Yeah.
How are you so successful in achieving that balance?
Um, yeah, I think treating the turntable as a musical instrument was the first step of it. Especially with Inside of Mind, we started really kind of getting experimental and creative and thinking about all the organic kind of ways of getting sounds from the turntable. And then more recently is kind of letting my voice kind of come into it and my singing voice come into it. And I find the balance between that has been and just really been able to capture what it is that I'm trying to bring across. So you get that kind of human element, and you get this kind of more electronic-y, kind of edgy digital element, and the two kind of coming together works really nicely. Yeah, I've always kind of like, I think the first album I ever listened to that was sort of captured that in the best way possible. Actually, two albums now that I'm thinking about it. Um, One was The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. There was something about the hip hop rhythms and the produced beats, but then also like the natural instrumentation that was brought into it. And I was like, oh man, this is so good. I love that combination, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the Beastie Boys have been really good at that always as well. Back in the day, doing like having that live funk element, but then also having those kind of hard beats and edgy kind of rhythms and edgy vocals, but still having some sort of soul and some sort of kind of vibration there, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I love the
yeah,
Beastie Boys. Oh,
yeah, me too, me
yeah.
too, me too. I think they were one of the first kind of bands that like cracked open the barrier between kind of guitar music. Like I was always into underground, like I was always searching out the underground kind of stuff, but they come from a punk background, right? So
Yeah.
back in my skater days, I was like listening to different punk and kind of seeking out all the different kind of like cool different underground punk bands, like the Bad Religions and the Pennywises and the I don't know, I can't even remember who else right now,
Yeah.
Fugazi or whatever it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the Beastie Boys sort of crossed me over into the hip hop world in some ways, and then there was from there it was a natural progression into kind of like the dance floor world and the rave culture, but it
Yeah.
all kind of centered around like the use of the turntable, which was
Oh,
like
yeah.
the main thing, yeah,
That's beautiful. I've always
yeah.
thought of the turntable as a musical instrument too. That's why I wanted
Absolutely, man, yeah.
I wanted to ask you that question.
Well, and it's such a like a cool rebel instrument in some ways where
Yeah.
it's like, it was never really supposed to be what it's being used for, right? So it's a bit of a like again, I know I'm not supposed to swear, but it's a big like to the to
Yeah.
the to the, you know, um just that the fact that
To
it's
the
come so
masses.
yeah, and it's come so far and it's like, yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I feel that. I feel that right there. In my heart. The piece in your bio that hits close to home for me as an educator is the fact that you now want to share this passion as owner, director, and instructor of Off Center DJ School in Toronto. What made you want to teach people how to DJ and produce music?
Yeah, gosh, it was Off Center has been around for about almost 20 years. Next year will be our 20th year. And it started off just as an idea, just a thing that I was like, oh, you know what? I saw a bit of an opening, there was not really this opportunity for people to go and learn this particular art form anywhere. And I was searching for it. I remember as a teenager being like, okay, where can I learn how to produce, or where can I learn how to make beats, or where can I go? And then you kind of just sort of end up doing it yourself because there wasn't really much around, right?
Right.
And the it was such a like a labor intensive road, which I value because there was a lot of work involved and a lot of self discipline that I learned along the way, right? But I was like, man, there's got to be a better way, right? To
Yeah.
to be able to get creative rather than like, you know, get stuck on all these little trivial things, right? So anyways, that's when I opened the doors up and I will try to open my own, creativity up and share it with people. And it's been amazing because you think you're giving to people, but what you get back is so incredible as well. Um, that's really been like the most surprising, rewarding thing for me. Being able to kind of get inspiration from the people that you're teaching and and kind of them renewing, also continually renewing your thirst to learn. Which like, in music you never stop learning, but it's like you have your own mental limits, but potentially where you're like, oh, I'm an awesome turntablist or whatever, I mean, I can do it, I'm done, it's good, right? And then it's like you're never done, man. And like people kind of continually, you know yeah, inspire you just to go further and do more and learn and open your mind, right? And yeah, so Off Center's dope, man. I'm so happy with the school and where it's been and where how it's developed and where it's come over these years. So
I've heard a lot of fantastic things about it. Even on this podcast, I had a couple of your students on my podcast, My Girl
awesome.
Tuesdays
Yeah, yeah,
and DJ DC on the podcast as well.
yep. Amazing people, amazing people.
And they're fantastic people to talk to too. Like quite honestly.
Yes, Yeah, super
Um,
open,
yeah.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's just awesome to speak to their teacher, you know, being from one teacher to another. I mean, we finally get to talk about this, and it's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Um, and I want to know who your influences are in electronic music.
Yeah, gosh, and so we mentioned a few of those kind of like earlier things. I think like if I traced it back, um there's a point where like rave culture took over for me, and I was kind of again, this is in the mid 90s, sort of thinking about, getting into just kind of understanding like just hearing bass, and
Yeah,
bass really took over for me, right? And I was like, oh my
yeah,
God, this is amazing. And I think some of the earlier artists, like, some Toronto throwbacks would be like Sniper and Mystical influence on the drum and bass scene. There was a guy named DJ Check back in the day who was from Vancouver, I believe, or somewhere in BC, who was always coming around doing shows. These are like more underground kind of DJs. Um, but that naturally led into, like, we were talking about hip hop, like we were talking about the Lauryn Hills and Common and Talib Kweli and the Beastie Boys I mentioned, the Roots, Mos Def, those were all big influences for me on
nice,
the hip hop side of things.
nice,
Um, yeah, and then more instrumental kind of stuff, producers. There was DJ Premier, DJ Shadow, DJ Crush, DJ Cam. Um, and they blew my mind open into like listening to jazz and going into funk then, and trying to kind of like dig into the older stuff,
yeah,
and exploring different ways of like, how do you go into classical music and grab a piece of that,
yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
more recently, I think over the years it's been like most recently, I think there's a experimental jazz electronic kind of group, also kind of with a bit of a hip hop flair, named Casa Overall, that I've been listening to lately. He's was touring with Diggable Planets most recently. Flume. Um, I usually draw a blank when people ask me who you listen to, so I'm on a roll here, so that's why I'm throwing them all out
Just
here.
spit it
Uh,
all out now,
Bonobo,
and I'll send you
yeah,
the
just
tape.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
man. All kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff.
I wanted to actually ask you about Kid Koala. I forgot to ask
Yeah,
you
yeah,
about Kid Koala and how you had a little collaboration with him, and
yeah.
how I think you played with him as well live. Um, what was that like? I mean, how'd you guys hook up? And he's one of my favorite Canadian DJ producers.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was an early influence as well, just kind of really taking the turntable and thinking about it. And he still does it to this day, thinking about it just in a different way, right? And kind of just, it wasn't about battling. It wasn't about, outdoing somebody else, which kind of like you end up in a bit of a tunnel vision that way, right? He really
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
explored it more creatively. We got on the same bill as him with Inside of Mind, and a couple times I think it was, and yeah, it was great. It was lovely to be able to kind of, one of these guys that you look up to coming up, and then being able
yeah,
to share the stage with him, and great guy, super super nice, super fun, what you get on stage with him smiling in his like costumes and whatever, it's like that's the real personality, right? So
yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Okay, one last question. Uh, how do you feel that you have influenced the genre of electronic music?
Yeah, more recently, I'm calling myself or thinking about myself as like a global tableist, and turntables time traveler, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
where it's like going into different genres and cultures, and especially going into the roots of Estonian culture, and kind of trying to evoke something and bring something back out of the past. Not that I'm the first guy who's done this by any stretch, but I feel like right now I'm onto something that's kind of got some good legs. So my imprint is more kind of like, again, trying to think about the turntable as something other than what we've considered it in a club environment. cracking it open, thinking about all the different creative ways that you can use it. And then, most importantly for me right now is kind of like digging in deep into who you are as a person and being able to use the turntable as that tool that brings those things out. So I hope that I hope that that's something that people vibe with, and I hope that lasts, and makes a mark, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Folks, Erik Laar joining us today on Influences podcast. Check out his single. It's A Long Way Down. It's quite trippy, man. I love it. And that music video is something else too. Erik Laar, thanks a lot for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, man. So good to be here. Yeah, man.
Peace, man.
And peace.
You have been watching and listening to Influences Podcast. Influences Podcast is written, produced, and hosted by yours truly, Jason Harischuk. Also produced by Angela Churchill, aka Purple Sapphire. My social media consultant is Christina Laukinen, also known as My Girl Tuesday. Check out Influences Podcast on Instagram and TikTok at influences_podcast. That's influences_podcast. Thanks for watching and listening.